Greetings. Today we're going to look at literature and how it relates to humanities. And storytelling has been with human beings since the beginning of time. Oral culture, oral storytelling precedes writing by millennia, of course. And the earliest form of literature in written form becomes the epic. The epic also was at first sung, accompanied by a lyric poet. The oldest epic we have in our Western tradition goes back to Gilgamesh, practically 3 millennia ago. Gilgamesh records in writing what had been sung and told through story format for millennia before that. Likewise, in the Eastern tradition in India, we have the famous Mahabharata as well as the Ramayana, which are actually the longest epics in world history, outnumbering the famous Iliad and Odyssey by Homer by 10 times the amount. Homer was about 1,000 years ago in the first millennia BC, and his famous epics became really the model for Western literature. The Iliad recounts the 10-year Trojan War. The Odyssey recounts Odysseus's return home. Generally, when we use the term epic, we think of grand. We have used epic as an adjective for epic adventure, epic movie, anything on a grand and large scale. And likewise, our epics follow Homer's model. After Homer's Iliad and Odyssey, we see the Roman epic poet Virgil writes the Aeneid, also takes place in the Trojan War. Homer did such a marvelous job at empathizing with the human factor, respecting and nobilizing one's enemy, that Virgil in the Aeneid takes the Trojan War and the Trojans as the original founders of Rome in Aeneas. Later epics, such as Milton's Paradise Lost, although they deal with other topics like the fall of man, also use the same conventions that Homer uses in his epic. The earliest form of epic poetry was accompanied by a lyric, and early poetry, lyric poetry, is meant to be sung and has a musical sound and tone. The Romans further developed lyric poetry on the subject of love and romance. The earliest poetess of love was Sappho, the 6th century BC Greek poet. Likewise, the sonnet, developed in the Italian Renaissance, was a 14-line poem that often dealt with the subject of love. The Italian sonnet was further adapted by Shakespeare, as well as blank verse, which kind of reflected the rhythm, the natural rhythm of the English language. We see blank verse as a major medium in Shakespeare's drama and poetry. Poetry seems to deal with words in a more and more concise manner than epic literature. And the most concise example of poetry would be the Japanese form of the haiku, which tells its story in 3 lines of 17 syllables. Likewise, we return to Japan for the first novel in world literature, namely The Tale of Genji. The novel comes from the Latin word novalis, which means new or unfamiliar. And likewise, the modern novel in literature is constantly experimenting with new forms. Our first Western novel is Cervantes' Don Quixote, the famous idealist in a cynical world. Modern novels such as James Joyce, Ulysses, go all the way back to the Homeric conventions of the epic. Ulysses recounts a day in the life of Odysseus or Ulysses, and the wandering of kind of a modern-day anti-hero. The novel becomes an increasingly important form in the 18th, 19th, and 20th century. In particular, in America, there's a search for the great American novel. Successive writers in the 19th and 20th century all wanted to write the great American novel. Starting with Melville's Moby Dick, moving to Twain's Huckleberry Finn, of course F. Scott Fitzgerald's The Great Gatsby, Hemingway's The Old Man and the Sea, Faulkner, The Sound and the Fury, are all examples of and candidates of the great American novel, capturing the American experience in literature. Today, more commonly, we have the short story genre, and we're going to look at Shirley Jackson's short story, The Lottery, for a true masterpiece in form. So enjoy exploring the various forms of literature that you find this week and in the cyber journeys this week. Thank you.